Joining me on Impact Catalyst is the Chief Executive Officer of the Juvenile Welfare Board, Beth Houghton. It's good to see you again. How are you?
Doing well.
Turbulent times. Can you give us an update on how JWB and its constituents are faring, and what are some of the big adjustments you've had to make?
Well, the Juvenile Welfare Board itself and our employees are really doing as well as anybody is doing. We were able to transition to working virtually just in a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
We're very fortunate to have an IT platform that supported that, and the kind of work that we do, by and large, we can do from anywhere. Now, our constituent agencies and the families and children in Pinellas County who we ultimately serve obviously are having significantly more difficulty. And like all employers, we have employees who are virtually schooling their children or caring for or worrying about parents or grandparents. So, as individuals, as people, we're not immune from those issues.
With the homeschool, one of the first things that was talked about when they moved from going to school to staying at home was that was really a key source of nutritious meals for a lot of the students. It was often, for many, the only time they were getting nutritious meals, and those food challenges have cropped up across the board. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's been one of several factors that have made for what we've called the perfect storm, or the worst perfect storm. You're absolutely right. A significant number of our children receive free, reduced cost, or even full cost, which was still modest, meals at school, always lunch and often breakfast. Mm-hmm. So just like we encounter in the summertime now, all of a sudden, all of these kids don't have those meals. Mm-hmm. And that's been one of several factors. I have to give great kudos to the Pinellas County Schools, their food services department, Lynn Geist and others, who very quickly stood up what they do in the summertime, which are called break spots, to have certain locations available for kids to pick up food. And they did that very quickly. But of course, not every kid can get to those spots. Not every family can get to those spots. But it's certainly made an impressive dent in what the need will be. And they're doing everything they can do to get food to kids.
So you call this the perfect storm. What are some of the elements with regard to food delivery that have made this the perfect storm?
Well, we all know that the need for basic services, for assistance with rent and utilities and food, have gone through the roof, as a significant percentage of our population are unemployed. We know that before all of this started, probably 45+% of our families were already one paycheck away from disaster. So now it's been 2 to 3 paychecks that they may not have received. So food is one of those needs that the need has escalated tremendously. At the same time, the emergency feeding organizations in our county, those would be the 2 food banks, St. Pete Free Clinics Food Bank and RCS Food Bank, as well as other, what I'm going to call food hubs, the Dream Center in Lillman and the Shepherd Center in Tarpon Springs. Mm-hmm. A huge percentage of the food that they are able to, in turn, give out to folks in need comes from grocery stores. Mm. And in the first weeks, and it's lightening some, but in the first weeks of all of this, all of us were at the grocery store stocking up, and things were running out, not just paper towels and toilet paper, but food as well. Mm-hmm. And so those grocery stores just had a lot less to give to the food banks at the end of every day. And so simultaneously, the food banks and the food pantries that they serve needed more food, but were getting in less food.
that does make a perfect storm. It's an interesting concept. With the 45% of folks being one paycheck away from a really rough situation, that feels like more of an if or a when and not if situation. So, having as much experience as you've had across different large nonprofit organizations, how would you like to see that shake out? Or, how will that rewrite sort of the rules of what we should accept with regard to, just how we're living financially going forward?
Well, the budget that statistic is based on comes from work that the United Way has done across the country, and then they break it down community by community,
Mhm.
and it's they base that. They look at household revenue as compared to really a pretty bare bones budget.
Mhm.
So we're not talking about individuals and families who just don't know how to save money. It's that the cost of rent has been going up much higher than wages have been going up, for instance. And the other basic costs of living are going up faster than wages have gone up.
Mhm.
So it's a systemic issue more than it is an individual behavior issue.
Sure.
Now, I have no doubt that um, all of us are going to be just that much more conservative as we come out of all of this, with the knowledge that in one way or another, our livelihoods or our resources or our savings or our retirement savings can be impacted. Even when you go back to January and February, everything was looking great. Unemployment was low, the stock market was high, everything looked pretty peachy. But all of us have seen the ways in which this can be impacted really very quickly. I think to your point, so if we go back to some sort of normal, whatever that is, one of the things that this episode has really made so obvious is how close to the edge so many families are all the time. And we didn't see this number of families impacted all at the same time.
Mhm.
But needless to say, if you're working on an hourly basis and you don't have sick time coverage and your child's sick for 3 or 4 days, that's 3 or 4 days pay out of maybe 10 days for that paycheck that you don't get,
Right.
or 3 or 4 days out of a month of 20 work days that you don't get.
Right.
And that that slams a budget. That's a big percentage. That slams a budget pretty hard. So those kinds of crises were happening all the time, just not all at once to this number of people all at once. I think it goes to what we're paying our lowest paid wage earners,
Mhm.
and whether or not that's really a living wage. And there has been more discussion about the fact that all of us are depending on the people who stock the shelves at Publix, for instance, and others for our sustenance, and yet they are some of the lowest paid workers.
Yeah, it seems like with natural disasters or with so many other things that we have so many safety precautions for different scenarios in, and this problem is a truly. I mean, we're seeing now that it's potentially more damaging than and even for a longer term than any natural disaster. Yet there hasn't been that sort of what happens if those 43% don't get that paycheck, because it's just been such a big problem to tackle, and it's been such a disparate problem. You can't say here's an expert on fire, we can just get together and figure out a plan to keep us safe. But now we see that it's got to be a priority, because this is something that can really be a real gut punch to the country that we haven't been prepared for.
It really can. And all of the agencies that work on basic needs and sustenance are being hit really hard. Some have more capacity to meet the need than others. The Juvenile Welfare Board has a program for children and families called the Family Service Initiative that helps certain families that are otherwise sustainable
Mhm.
to to pick up, maybe rent or utilities or some assistance with public programs in the midst of what's considered to be just an episode
Hmm.
of difficulty, to keep those families from falling into the trap of becoming homeless and never getting out again.
Right.
So we've needless to say seen a significant increase in the calls and significant increase in the needs. And fortunately, we're able to meet those needs within the criteria of that program. But I'd circle back to food because when somebody's working with their budget, money that is spent on food then isn't available for rent or isn't available for utilities. And rent and utilities, while the utility companies are not turning off the power or turning off the water during this time period, the bills will still be there and need to be paid eventually. And the same is true for rent. So there is a moratorium on evictions currently, but it doesn't mean that rent won't ultimately be due. And so, we're going to see various phases of this impact people at different times. So one of the reasons food and food support from food pantries and food banks is such a big deal is it provides a little bit of relief on that total family budget. It not only provides food, which is critical for life, but it also means there's a little bit more money available to pay some of those other necessities to keep a roof over somebody's head and the utilities on.
That's great. Yeah, and I think it offers, to your point, a smoothing effect where, the worst strategy is when, just a small blip that, with a little help, they could have gotten past that and gone back to a normal, sustainable existence. But if they don't get past that, it can drop them into a place, like you said, homelessness that, becomes a whole nother ballgame to try to climb back out of.
It's so difficult to climb out of that's one of our efforts in our family service initiative is to try to forestall that and provide a little bit of support at a critical time so people don't fall into that into that well that is very difficult to climb out of. A couple of the other things I would want to mention. One of the other parts of the perfect storm, it was not scheduled to have happened yet, but the second Saturday in May is typically the letter carriers food drive that provides a significant amount of shelf-stable food, a lot of canned food in particular, to our food banks and our food pantries all across the country. And it's an extraordinary effort by our letter carriers to do that work, and a huge an army of volunteers who help make that happen. But that's not going to happen this year. And so that's going to have an impact on the food available in food banks and food pantries throughout the summer and part of the fall. The next time that major food drives occur tend to be around November and December during holiday times. So this drive is one that all of the food providers, emergency food providers, really count on to help them stay in the game. Just to give you some idea of the increased impact of this time on our food providers, and a few of the things that the Juvenile Welfare Board has done. Places like the free clinics, food pantry, might typically serve 100, 150 families a day, and it's been 700. And you may have seen pictures of not only them, but other pantries open with drive-through capacity to make it faster and certainly to reduce the contact person to person, keeping everybody safer. They've also opened up a remote food pantry or a mobile pantry at Child's Park a couple days a week. All of those are on the ground indications of how big the need is. I would throw out a few resources to people who need to know where those pantries are. The Juvenile Welfare Board's website under COVID-19 has very up-to-date information on not only the pantries that are open during regular times, but also the special availability of food, whether it's from the school system in their break spot locations, or it's mobile pantries and pop-up pantries that are occurring. And I want to make sure I lift up four organizations in the county that do this work all the time, but have been particularly impacted. I've mentioned the free clinic, but the two food banks in our area that have significant logistical capability to pick up truckloads of food, to refrigerate large quantities of food, and so on, are the RCS Food Bank in Clearwater and the St. Pete Free Clinic Food Bank in St. Pete. And in addition to those, there are two, I'll call them hubs. I'm not sure what they would call themselves, but two other organizations, the Dream Center in Lillman and the Shepherd Center in Tarpon Springs. So you really have covered the county that way, who also have significant capacity to store and then redistribute food to other smaller agencies that in particular don't have the capacity for refrigerating a lot of food. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage anybody who is concerned about this issue and wants to be a part of the solution to look to any one of those four. You can find links to all of them on our website. We've got a special place for support your food banks that you can find information on how to assist any one of those four.
That's great. And I'd be remiss if I didn't throw Feeding Tampa Bay onto that, add them to the list as well. They've been a great partner.
And Feeding Tampa Bay has done a great deal in the 10 county area that they cover. And I probably mentioned the other four more because they don't get as much media love, yeah. But all, they're all very important, and all have just immediately pivoted to whatever they needed to do to get more food to the people that they serve. One of the things I would point out for people who want to be helpful, while having food drives and bringing food to those locations is always helpful, the fact is $1 donated is going to go a lot further. All of these organizations that we've talked about had the capacity to buy in bulk and get better prices than you and I get if we go to the grocery store and purchase things retail. So food drives, I think, are an especially good way to teach children about, in a tangible and concrete way, about needing to help other kids. And with my kids, what I tend to do is have them pick out the things that they would like, and talk to them about the fact that there are kids that don't have peanut butter or don't have granola bars or, whatever that might be, just to remind them that they're privileged, that they have food on the table every night. But if, as an adult, you're trying to really make your dollar go the furthest, any one of these organizations can take your $1 or $10 or as much as you want to send and make it go a lot further.
Agreed. Yeah, they're as they've scaled and become more efficient, when you have different foods and it's the variety of cans and different products coming in, to scale, they have a very specific system with a very specific set of meals that they can buy in bulk and run through the system. And it's just hugely efficient. And that's, another reason why, in addition to the bulk buying capabilities, that it's just your dollars go a lot further. It's directly fed into that system.
Absolutely. So that's some of what we've done at the Juvenile Welfare Board with our contingency funds. We had the ability to pivot pretty quickly, and we've put about $300,000 into food for those four organizations that I mentioned. $200,000 of that was with prepackaged meals that were here and could get on the ground very quickly. And we purchased those for other reasons for other organizations through GA Foods. And that was a way to quickly get food into the system. And then we added another $100,000 for bulk purchases of food for that reason.
Well, it's a great pivot, a very smart use of the money. I would expect no less from you. So thank you for your continued smart leadership, and we'll continue to support you in any way that we can.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.